And I have a story to tell you that I've discovered that only people with a background in neurolinguistics truly can appreciate this. I've tried it with other groups, and they just didn't understand at all what I was talking about. But I know that you'll get it immediately. And it's a story about a dog who was going to send a telegram. So the dog went into the telegraph office and took a piece of paper and wrote down the words of the telegram and carried it up to the window to the clerk and presented it to be sent. And the clerk looks and says, woof, woof, woof. Woof, 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 woof. And she says, well, that's kind of interesting. She says, but we have a special deal. You can get 10 words for the same, for the same price. So you could add another woof, for example, and it wouldn't cost you any more money. And the dog says, really? He says, well, but then it would be woof, 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 woof. And the clerk says, well, yes, that's right. And the dog said, well, but that wouldn't make very much sense now, would it? See, I love neurolinguistic programmers because they understand this. Try this out on some of your other friends. You'll understand they have no idea what you're talking about. They just haven't learned how to count their woofs yet. So you've got it down. Well, these are some great questions. You've been learning a lot of stuff. Making headway, right? A month ago you started? All right. Well, I have got so many places that I want to. I'm trying to decide where to really bite into this apple because I'm getting a take on you as I do this and watching these responses. Stephen would start, by the way, by sharing a quotation from T.S. Eliot as well. And some of you may be familiar with this particular quotation. T.S. Eliot says, "We shall not cease from exploration, and the end of all our exploring will be to arrive at last where we started and to know the place for the first time." I think that's really great, that there's some sense in which, we're going to talk about a whole lot of things, but at the end of the day, you're going to find yourself back in the same world that you came out of. But it's going to look different. I certainly hope that your journey in NLP land has already begun to do that for you. That's why we're here, right? So it is morning. I will share with you a technique that I use regularly, that I teach my clients regularly, that I would encourage you to offer to your clients regularly, in the service of this idea about reconnecting or getting rapport with their own inner self, right, and establishing that relationship. It used to be, in the early days of my practice, I would send people home. Some of you know the Betty Erickson self-hypnosis technique, right? Do you cover that in the prac or anywhere? Or, no? It's in it's in the literature. It's in the NLP literature. It's also on my website, which, just for reference, is Phoenix Services with a hyphen, phoenix-services.org. There's a description of it there. And I used to teach my clients this, and I would tell them to go home and to practice this technique for 20 minutes every day, right? 20 minutes just because it sounded like a good number, and and the TM people had told me that was a magical number, and how long it took to to enter into the proper level of trance and all that stuff. And then they would come back, say a week later, and they would tell me, I'd say, how's your self-hypnosis practice going? And they would say, well, I did it on Wednesday, and I meant to do it on Thursday, but I had, and it turned out that they had done it like once or twice, and I just couldn't get them to do this for seven days. So I knew I needed something else, and finally I ran into this thing called, this technique called quantum focusing. By the way, I think there may be something else called quantum focusing out there, so if you Google this, you might find a couple interesting things under that title. But called quantum focusing, and the thing that's so cool about quantum focusing is that it takes 2 minutes. And most people can find 2 minutes. There is a catch, however. The catch is that it's not a once a day thing, that it's a several times a day thing. And the way that I think about it is that if life were a movie, or if your life were being filmed, and you're preparing for the next scene, how do you get yourself into character for that next scene? You know, who do you want to be in the next hour and a half block of your life, or the next, you know, the next event? Whether it's so I tell people, do this in the morning. Do it maybe when you have a tea break at work or something like that, and you could try it out, say lunch hour, and then maybe when you come home from work, and then after supper, or if you're going out for the evening, for instance, maybe. It's kind of the mental equivalent of stopping in front of the mirror and checking to make sure, you know, is my collar right, is my hair, you know, before you go into the next activity. It's just that simple. And all that it involves, by the way, the guys that invented this, I want to make sure and give them credit. They are a couple of friends of mine, a fellow named Michael Elner and Alan Barsky. And they had been doing a lot of work in the 80s, I guess it was, with AIDS patients. And as the AIDS epidemic abated somewhat, they were having people show up that weren't AIDS patients, but that had other issues that they were dealing with, like fibromyalgia and irritable bowel syndrome, and you know, and a bunch of things. And they started, you know, they were curious. Will this have the same effectiveness with those people? So they started using it with more and more folks, and it seemed across the board to just be a really great healing modality on all levels. And I think it really is about, my sense is, what makes it work is that it really is about establishing and maintaining that connection with your own inner self. So if you're ready, you don't need to get too ready because it's only 2 minutes, right? But what I'd like you to do is to just get comfortable for a minute and to turn your attention inside. That was the induction, by the way. To turn your attention inside and to become aware of the fact that you occupy all of the space between the top of your head and the tips of your feet. The way that I like to think about it, at least with myself, is that there is a Michael-shaped place in space, and I just happen to be filling it all up. So just having a sense of the space that you occupy. And in that space, I want to invite you to offer 3 affirmations. And the first would be to declare in there, I live with a happy heart. And to take a moment to appreciate the idea of a happy heart. And you can continue with a playful spirit and take a moment to get a sense of that playfulness of spirit, maybe even become aware of a sparkle in your eye, if that makes sense. And with a peaceful mind, and just consider that peacefulness of mind. And then just hang out in that place for what's left of the 2 minutes, which are now almost entirely past. And before you come all the way back out, finally declare by shouting silently inside, I deserve to be healthy and happy. And then bring your attention back out to the room where you began and go about your business. So it's nice. I think of it as being just a little reset button, you know, that you can do from time to time. And you know, good to have those reminders, particularly if you can find a way to build them into your schedule.